Welcome to this evening's online event entitled Artists Defying Gaza Genocide, from Naji al-Ali to Rafaat Alareer. This event will be an online panel discussion with Palestinian artists from all artistic mediums, touching on the power of art as a form of resistance, how they channel their resistance and solidarity through their art medium, and a focus and dedication on Palestinian artists, both past and present, and their plights and their message through art. I just want to say, before starting today's event, we'll be having 3 speakers, and please do tune online for the whole duration of the event. So our first speaker of today's panel discussion is Suleiman Mansour. Suleiman is one of the most distinguished and renowned artists in Palestine. His style embodies steadfastness in the face of a relentless military occupation. His work, which has come to symbolize the Palestinian national identity, has inspired generations of Palestinians and international artists and activists alike. Born in 1947, Mansour spent his childhood around the verdant hills and fields of Birzeit, where he was born, and later his adolescence in Bethlehem and Jerusalem. These experiences left a significant mark on his work, heightening a sense of gradual loss in Palestine, especially after the occupation of the West Bank and Jerusalem in 1967. His early experiences also presented him with the symbols and images he would later use to preserve and highlight Palestinian identity. By using symbols derived from Palestinian life, culture, history, and tradition, Mansour uniquely illustrates Palestinians' resolve and connection with their land. His pieces epitomize art as a form of resistance. With orange trees, he represents land lost in the Nakba of 1948. With olive trees, he represents land occupied in 1967. With women wearing traditional embroidered dresses, he represents Palestinian land and the Palestinian Revolution. With the landscape of Palestine and its stone terraces, he represents the mark of Palestinian farmers on the land. With images of Jerusalem and the glistening Dome of the Rock, he represents the Palestinian homeland and the dream of return. Mansour, together with artists Vera Tamari, Taysir Barakat, and Nabil Anani, founded the New Visions movement in 1987. This movement was formed in response to the First Intifada and called on artists to boycott Israeli art supplies and utilize local natural materials such as coffee, henna, and clay. Mud was the basis for human life in many cultures and religions, as well as an actual piece of Palestinian land, and was the tool of choice for Mansour. I'm just going to pass it over to you now, Suleiman.
Marhaba. Thank you, Farah. Thank you. I have to say something about the Zionist movement and the importance they felt that art is. And in 1906, they established the first institution in Palestine, that was Bezalel Art Academy. They wanted artists to create the images for Israeli art and for Israeli identity. And they tried all the time to forbid us to establish any art academy in Palestine. So until 1994, we could not establish in our universities any art academies in these universities. And when we started our work in Palestine, they in the beginning they didn't give us permission to work as a union, and then we tried to work without a permission, and we started printing our works as posters in 1975-76, and then they started to confiscate these posters. And then they started to confiscate the paintings, the original ones. And in 1981, they forbid us to use red, green, black, and white in our paintings. like these are the colors of the Palestinian flag, and they so at that time the story of the watermelon was created because we told them if we paint a flower with these colors, what will happen? They said they will confiscate it. And then they said, even if you paint a watermelon, we will confiscate it. And so we went out from that meeting, and we told the newspapers about that meeting. And then the story happened at that time. After 1980, they started to imprison artists. And in 1981, I was imprisoned twice for short times, like 1 month, 2 months. And they tried to intimidate artists, not to use any political art or any art that reflects the life in the Palestinian under occupation. The first art academy we established in 2006, like 100 years after they established their first academy. And we don't have, of course, any infrastructure for art in Palestine all these years. And until recently, we have a museum of art. But before that, we didn't have any galleries or any museums. We didn't have any funding for artists and for art. I think they tried their best to besiege the artist and the art movement. And it was very hard for us to even bring art books from outside. And I think we lived, the artists here, we lived like in a ghetto. We didn't know what's happening outside. Until the Oslo Agreement, it was open a little bit, and you could travel and you could establish an art academy and so on. Now there is a lot of pressure on artists to create art about Gaza. And everybody is waiting for us to do something new. And I think this is a big pressure on the artists because, if you want to make something new, it doesn't come like a decision in one night. You can do that. There should be like a process, and it needs time. But now what I see, what's happening among the artists, that many of them are afraid even to work. And now and everybody is saying that in the first Intifada you changed the art a little bit, but at that time we were part of that Intifada. We took part in it. Now in Gaza we are just watching like anybody else, and it's a different situation. Well, that's what I have to say about art now, and a little bit about the history of Palestinian art under occupation. If you have any questions, please ask me.
Hi, Suleiman. Just one question before because we have a panel discussion and we speak to the other speakers. I just wanted to ask you particularly about what you had mentioned there regarding the watermelon and the symbolism, the significance. We've seen the popularity increase of people using a watermelon and people understanding the Palestinian significance of a watermelon. Could you tell us a bit more of how that specifically came to be? What kind of, and how did you use it at the time? How did you use the watermelon? Was it, just in kind of your art medium, or just to tell us more about the significance of it?
Yeah, I think the first artist who painted the watermelon as a symbol for the Palestinian flag was artist Khalid Hourani. He did it in 1997. But then, I mean, it didn't become a symbol at that time until the Sheikh Jarrah and what's happening in Sheikh Jarrah. I don't know what happened, but at that time it started to become a symbol. I think we have to make a study about how symbols can grow in such situations. I mean, I don't have any explanation how it became a symbol, but it happened to me, the story, and I just told the story to the reporters and to the artist, and then they took it, and Khalid took it, and he started he did this painting, and what happened in Sheikh Jarrah, I can't explain. Why did it come back, and why people took it as a symbol of the Palestinian flag? And I can't explain more about that.
That's no problem. Thank you for explaining as well. And just one question, particularly following the theme of today's event. We're talking about artists and their artwork, specifically Palestinian artists, and the importance of the Palestinian struggle through art. Many people feel that art has the power to allow people to envision what liberation would look like, what freedom could look like. It gives people, it revitalizes a struggle for people to really visualize what they're fighting for.
Yeah. In the 70s and 80s, we were trying very hard to create symbols for Palestinian identity. And we took from ancient art, like Canaanite art, and from Islamic art, the calligraphy. And we took from folk art, like the embroidery and the folk dresses. And we took from the landscape and Palestinian villages, Palestinian architecture. I mean, Palestinian culture, folk culture is so rich and it's so old and so rich that it's easy to use anything, and it becomes like a symbol of the identity. And I mean, what moved us at that time, the denial of the existence of the Palestinian people at that time, because Israel and the West, they denied, even some Arab countries, they denied the existence of the Palestinian people. So the artists, and I don't mean visual artists, but poets and writers and music people, everybody was working on the theme of identity. But after the Oslo Agreement, they accepted the existence of the Palestinian people, but they accepted the existence of the Palestinian people, but not his full humanity. I mean, they accepted us as half humans, not full humans, because if they accepted us as full humans, then we have to get our freedom, and we have to get our state and so on. But they accepted us as half humans. So the role of art in the 70s and 80s was to create or to enhance Palestinian identity. And now our role, I see it as is to rehumanize the Palestinians. and also our big role also as artists is to connect with other Palestinian artists, because Palestinians, as you know, many of them are living in outside, like refugees. So we have to give them, because you know, sometimes I get calls from young people from the United States. They tell me that they love Palestine because through my art, and that makes me really proud, because I do that. I mean, to make people proud, to make Palestinians proud of their land, of their identity, is a big role for Palestinian artists. And I think we have to do that now, because now it's really it's becoming too much now. I mean, our living, because they again now they started to deny our existence, because now we don't exist at all. So we have to come back again to do symbols of identity and to enhance it. And it's like a vicious circle for us. You know. So sometimes I feel I'm really fed up of all these things. You know. Sometimes I love to work as an artist without any message, but I can't. You know, I just have to. I have to tell the story of myself as part of this people.
Just one more question for you as well, Suleiman. Is there any specific Palestinian artists that have inspired you over the years, or Palestinian artists that have inspired your artwork?
Me personally, I used to love Ismail Shammout, and then we were, all Palestinian artists, they were influenced by poetry, the poetry of Mahmoud Darwish and Samih Al-Qasim and Mu'in Bsiso and so on. And poetry was a real inspiring thing for us. Of course, Naji Ali was a big influence on many of us. I mean, to think politically. I mean, in the world, Picasso was one of the artists that I was influenced by, and of course Rivera from Mexico. From Arab art, De El Azawi, you know. But as I said, we didn't, at that time in the 70s and 80s, we didn't have a lot of knowledge about what's happening in the Arab art and in the world. We didn't have any art library. We didn't have any books. We didn't see exhibitions. So, I mean, we didn't have a lot of influences from many artists. I think sometimes that's good, you know, because now after this, the people are open to the internet, and they can see art everywhere, from Japan to Chile, and influences are so big and so much on them. I mean, young artists, not all of them, many of them are losing their identity. So I think the ghetto that we were living in the 70s and 80s, it had some good points, you know. Sometimes I think about that we developed our art from our own imagination and from our poetry, from our culture. We didn't have so many influences from the world.
Okay, thank you very much, Suleiman, for your time and for your insight today. We have just a few other speakers, so we're going on to Farah and Nadine. But thank you again, Suleiman, for your time and your contribution today. The next speaker is Farah al-Bulsi. Farah is an Oscar-nominated and BAFTA award-winning Palestinian-British filmmaker and human rights advocate. She has written, directed, and produced short fiction films exploring topics that matter to her. Farah has spoken and screened her work internationally at film festivals, universities, and the United Nations. Her short film, The Present, underscores the importance of freedom of movement as a basic human right for Palestinians. The Present received over 50 audience and jury awards at top-tier international film festivals, a BAFTA award for the Best British Short Film, and an Academy Award nomination for Best Live-Action Short at the Oscars. It was licensed internationally, including to Canal Plus and Netflix worldwide. Farah's most recent work, The Teacher, had its world premiere in official selection at Toronto International Film Festival 2023 and marks her feature-length film directorial debut. The multi-award-winning film stars well-known Palestinian actor Saleh Bakri and British actress Imogen Poots. Farah has been invited to serve as a jury member at numerous festivals and as a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. She uses the power of storytelling, her social media and online platform, which is www.oceansofjustice.com, to share the Palestinian experience with Western audiences. Over to you, Farah. I think you're on mute.
I am on mute. Thank you very much, Farah. Thank you, Sliman. Okay, so I'm basically going to speak mostly specifically, I think, about the art of film and cinema, because obviously that's the world from which I am in. But pretty much everything that I would say can and should be applied to all art forms. For me personally, film is one of, if not the most powerful and beautiful means of communication and art forms the world has ever known. It has the power to basically transcend borders, overcome stereotypes, challenge misconceptions, misperceptions, and essentially raise the global social conscience. Now, Khalil Gibran, he wrote, "In battling evil, excess is good, because he who is moderate in presenting the truth, in announcing the truth, is presenting half truth. He conceals the other half out of fear of the people's wrath." And I'm afraid that in the struggle for Palestine, we have been so busy putting out fires, dealing with relief and humanitarian elements, always in the defensive position of reacting, that our narrative has basically fallen to the wayside. It has therefore, by and large, not been presented effectively or widely enough to the outside world. So without a truthful, evocative, more complete and widely disseminated narrative, how else can we expect to rally people of goodwill to our cause alongside us? How can we hope to shift consciousness and consciences? How can we build and scale solidarity? How can we encourage meaningful boycott, divestments, and sanctions and achieve a full-scale global movement? Not only now during this ongoing genocide in Gaza, but for freedom, justice, and equality for all Palestinians finally. Now, we Palestinians, we ended up in this terrible situation for many, many reasons. So, and they're beyond this call, this event. But a core explanation for its duration and its scale, despite having truth and right and international law on our side, is because political Zionism is a colonial settler enterprise. And it is no secret that all colonists throughout history, they work very, very hard to ensure that the indigenous people they are colonizing are first dehumanized, then branded as barbarians, terrorists, and eventually their very existence is denied. And it's done for internal and external consumption. So people of goodwill around the world and internally will not empathize with those populations. And then any and all violations, atrocities, abuses can be carried out against them with no recourse for the victims and no punishment for the perpetrators. And we know that this has systematically, methodically, meticulously been carried out by Israel against the Palestinians, right? Exactly, even more so today with the horror we're witnessing in Gaza, that is confirmed. So for liberation to have a fighting chance, it requires engaging people on a large scale in ways that reverse this dehumanization. And Slimane just touched upon that, so that that empathy can be drawn from them, and in turn, action drawn from empathy. And another major requirement, for the struggle to succeed is to provide some kind of context. So we need to be able to inform and educate people so that Palestinian resistance, revolt, aggression, violence even, can no longer sort of be framed as this terrorism, barbarism, baseless hatred, but actually recognized and even respected for what it is: resistance to decades-long illegal occupation, protest against a 17-year blockade on Gaza, outrage against apartheid, a system of apartheid, rejection of ongoing war crimes, rejection of genocide, rejection of home demolitions and child arrests and checkpoints and daily humiliations. But until the lion learns how to write, the story will always glorify the hunter. When I came across this African proverb, I immediately, instinctively thought of Palestine. And I knew that, unfortunately, we were the lions in the equation. So if we want the true stories of Palestinians to be heard and felt, and for people to take action with us and for our cause, we must tell our stories creatively, authentically, evocatively, and certainly beyond our echo chambers. So it's not to say that we don't have or haven't had our accomplished, brilliant, esteemed storytellers, our writers, our poets, our artists, our filmmakers, orators, commentators, many of whom Slimane has just mentioned. It's more in the sense that we don't have enough of them. Many have been silenced, have been killed. I mean, Slimane mentioned he was imprisoned twice, killed. The name of this event is Naji al-Ali to Rafaat Alareer. They have both been killed, or they've passed away, while others have been forced to dwell in an environment that didn't allow them to flourish like many of those in the 70s and since. So frankly, our narrative has been hijacked for decades now. And if we are not actively and continuously telling and funding the telling of our own stories, then our oppressor and their cronies will do it for us. It is also the fact that technology that can bypass the traditional gatekeepers of false narratives and project the works of our storytellers much further across the globe today was not previously available. So an example of that, again, briefly touched on by Slimane, is that he could go to bed tonight and post an image of one of his paintings. And of course, it won't necessarily evoke the emotion that standing in front of one of his paintings might evoke in person. But still, he could post one of his paintings on his Instagram account tonight, and it can go twice around the world by the time he wakes up tomorrow morning. Something we could never do a long time ago. So for me, I chose film as an art form, not just because I love film and I want to express myself creatively, but also because, as I said at the start, it's because I think it can serve as the master of advocators. There are, of course, so many forms of advocacy that we should be supporting that exist, and doing more of course, including not limited to political advocacy, media, human rights, BDS, academic advocacy. But in my opinion, one of if not the most important forms of advocacy, because it essentially ignites all those other forms, is artistic advocacy. Artists are able to engage us through film, video, audio, visual installations, poetry, theater, using the full array of human emotions, from deep pain to humor. And that's because art speaks to the heart. And that is the main way you can humanize. That is the main way you can draw empathy. And it paves the way for all other forms of advocacy to be more effectively received. And you need only look at Hollywood as the perfect example of how film and the way that Muslims or Arabs have been portrayed in film can influence perceptions in the world. Or consider how resistance theater has been cited as a major and powerful factor in influencing the court of world opinion and activating audiences around the globe in solidarity, which in turn contributed towards the pressures from world governments that ultimately brought an end to apartheid South Africa. In some ways, take myself as a case study. I mean, I chose artistic advocacy in the form of live action narrative cinema, because I knew you could have all the facts and all the figures and all the truths and proofs and maps and international law under the sun. But unless, and very, very important, but unless I had opened people's hearts, that I wouldn't be able to access their minds or their sense of reason. And studies have shown that even if you provide absolute factual proof to people that contradicts something they've repeatedly been told or made to believe, a deep inertia exists. Even in the face of evidence and facts, not only do people stick to their beliefs, but sometimes they become even more entrenched in those attitudes and perspectives. But those same studies have shown that if you can bring those same people to empathize, if you can address them through their hearts regarding the same topics, the same, views and beliefs, they become more receptive. And it is empathy that ultimately changes their minds or moves them away from their original positions. So speaking to someone's heart gives you a much better chance of bringing them over to understanding your perspective and cause. You have people like Dale Carnegie, the writer of How to Win Friends and Influence People, who said, when dealing with people, remember you are not dealing with creatures of logic, but with creatures of emotion. So, when we're talking about UN Resolution 282, Fourth Geneva Convention, Article 49, all well and good, very, very important, but it will only go so far. What really influences people is information that hits them where they feel on an emotional level. And that can only really be done through some kind of storytelling. People love stories. We're all attracted to them as human beings. It's in our nature. It's why we enjoy good books and films. It's why we pick up the newspaper every day. It's why we go to a museum. It's why we watch the news. It's why we go on social media. It's why people come together for meals. Stories are the currency of life. And with art, there is no limit to the stories you can tell or the ways in which you can tell them. So back to the lion learning to write. We need to become relentless, fearless lions who become masters of our own narrative, telling our own stories, for which there are so many. We don't need to deceive. We don't need to sensationalize or create melodrama, all things the oppressor has often engaged in, because we have truth and right and international law on our side. We also have like a plethora of absurd, engaging, incredible stories you couldn't even make up if you tried. So art alone cannot free Palestine. But I believe without it, Palestine will never be free. It is the pillar of advocacy upon which all others stand. Films alone cannot change the struggle, but they have their important role within the struggle. They engage and ignite. And at this time, with the ongoing genocide in Gaza and the death and the destruction that's also being escalated even more in the West Bank than previously, I believe that films like my films, and I am going to plug The Teacher right now, which is my latest film, because it's having its cinema release in the UK and Ireland from September 27th. And I really believe, and this is the feedback I've had about this film so far, it can re-energize, reignite, it can remind and reactivate so many of us in the struggle right now that are absolutely exhausted at this moment in time, and pave the way for those who know less about the lived Palestinian experience to ultimately feel with an oppressed people and be galvanized to take action and end the oppression and end this genocide and so forth, with and alongside us. So, of course, a powerful, clear, unified social movement needs to be in place to liberate Palestinians. But for it to grow and build momentum, you need people to feel compelled to join that movement. And that requires engagement through art. We will stop this genocide. Palestinians will be free one day. I truly believe that. And if you look back at the last 50, 20, 10, 5 years, even the last 12 months, the strides are evident. While on the ground, the situation is beyond desperate. It is the crime of all crimes. In the court of world opinion, the veil of false narratives has fallen. The truth is being revealed. The global movement for Palestine has escalated to an unprecedented level. The ICJ has made some groundbreaking rulings on the occupation, on the settlements, on apartheid. Even US elections have been affected. Tipping points are always potentially around the corner, and persistent action towards a united movement is the main ingredient, but hope and art complete the recipe. And I would like to add finally that at this point, and I say this as much as I can at any Q&As or events I'm speaking at, boycott, divestment, sanctions is the most important thing people really need to know that they need to get on board with if we want this to stop. We want all this horror and injustice to stop. Follow the actual movement, because ultimately capitalism and profits is sadly the language that those who do not care about Palestine and Palestinian freedoms and rights, it is the only language they understand. So BDS is the way we can force their hands. And I hope that my art and all artists are igniting and energizing people towards that movement as well. And that's it for me.
Hi, Farah. Thank you so much for your contribution and your insight there. I just kind of wanted to touch on two questions that we received online. So you touched on there in your speech the role of Hollywood, specifically in portraying Muslims, Arabs, Palestinians, and there's been kind of this push online reframing that Hollywood narrative. People acknowledging how Hollywood is sort of the unofficial propaganda ministry of the US government. And we've seen recently as well with the Palestinian journalist Bassam in Gaza, that a lot of Hollywood actors, well, actually a minority of Hollywood actors, have come against her and trying to stop her from getting that Emmy. I just wanted to ask you, and the questions online, to summarize the questions online, have you received any censorship yourself? Or are there any kind of censorship of Palestinian filmmakers, Palestinian films that come to mind? And just want to know your kind of personal experience of this.
Okay, well, first of all, with regards to Bassam and what you've just mentioned, yeah, I don't know if you saw, but there was an open letter that we reacted with that I was signed up to. It was in Variety and a number of other outlets, trades and publishers, where over 65 Palestinian filmmakers came together and not only, commended that she wasn't removed and that they didn't capitulate to that pressure that you mentioned, but also, of course, calling out. It's not just Hollywood. Ultimately, it's a lot of Western media and entertainment industry, and even mainstream media when it comes to even journalism and so forth. It's all connected and it's all contributed and needs to be called out, and it needs to be and that's happening now a lot more, I think, than in the past, which is, I think, a really important thing at this point. Now, look, for me, it's a strange one, because independent cinema is extremely hard regardless of your subject matter. You know, and I think sometimes when things go wrong, or something is not given the reaction or the recognition that one would have hoped for as an artist, for example, you might connect it with, oh, because it's Palestinian, or oh, because that they were biased, and that's not always the case. It is a really, really hard industry. I know many, many filmmakers who are absolutely not engaged with anything to do with Palestine, that have films that have ended up in the graveyard of films, or that never got distribution, or that. So, and some of them are very good films. So, you know, it's not always the reason, and so I can't always, you know, blame it on that. In my case, I've had a good experience when it came to the present. I've had actually a phenomenal experience when it came to the present. And it actually confirmed to me that if you can engage, you know, with your storytelling in a way that has a sort of quality and standard that people around the world have gotten accustomed to, and that they can really appreciate the art in it and so forth, and the storytelling, then they will kind of recognize and reward you and include you and so forth. You have to remember that, I'll give you an example. Netflix had taken, and I'm not sitting here like saying, oh, Netflix is amazing. I'm saying people think that Netflix took this film, The Present, because it was nominated for an Oscar and it won a BAFTA. That wasn't the case. It was signed up months before I was even longlisted for either of those awards. So, you know, there's an example of, okay, they appreciated the film. Of course, the film had been winning awards and so forth, but, you know, and when it got nominated, you're talking about thousands of members who voted for the film. So that tells you, and a big majority of them are from Hollywood. So you know, bear that in mind. But overall, it is frustrating, because we know that there are gatekeepers in the entertainment industry, and there are those who would rather our narratives not be seen, not be heard, or they are self-censoring, whereby they are not willing to sort of risk their own careers or their own companies and so forth by championing your work, even though they appreciate it. And I will say that we've had some distributors, with regarding to The Teacher as an example, where they have responded by saying, we really, not directly to me, via my sales agents and so forth, by saying, we really love the film, we really appreciate the film. We can't afford to take this on and deal with what backlash and what violence might ensue. And of course, violence can be verbal violence. Violence can be threatening, physical violence, but not necessarily carried out. And we've even had people say, we are reluctant and afraid. We don't want to deal with that. And then there are those who don't say that directly, but indirectly infer it. So it exists, but it's not always the reason, is my point.
Also, as well, just one last question. I remember personally a few years ago watching The Present on Netflix, and it probably being one of the first films, TV shows I had watched on that platform, being, you know, portraying accurately what is happening in Palestine from a Palestinian perspective. I remember just being very emotional watching it at the time as well, just because of everything it conveyed in such a short amount of time. And a question we have online as well is there advice you would have to other Palestinian artists and filmmakers to not only overcome that censorship, but to touch people in the same way that The Present did for so many people?
I'd say my main piece of advice would be, speak from your heart, and people will receive it into their hearts. And I believe that was the secret ingredient. Everyone says, how? Of course, time, place, luck, Rabna. Of course, it's all involved. And it's a good film, don't get me wrong. But I truly believe when I made The Present, I wasn't setting out for those awards, for that fame, for those nominations. I wanted to tell a story from my heart to an audience's heart. And so follow your creativity and do it from the heart. Let it really, and I think everyone who worked on that film, it came from their heart. I think Saleh Bakri's performance was him, in Arabic, fishing albu, really presenting what was in his heart. And I think that is the advice I give when you don't contrive. Yes, of course, ultimately, I want my films to be seen by audiences all across the world. I've just given you a speech about how important it is to reverse that dehumanizing, but I don't try to make my film as per that formula or something. I go in creatively, I'm doing something from my heart, and ultimately, it will by default rehumanize. It will by default resonate with audiences. By default, it will be appreciated. But also try aim for some kind of quality. It's sad to say this, but the halo effect exists in the world. It's very rare that you'll have a Blair Witch project, like if people who know that, it's a film that was like, on a camera that made millions and it was a horror movie. You'll rarely have that. People are now accustomed to at least some kind of quality standard. And sadly, if you can't achieve that, at least some kind of quality in your filmmaking, your storytelling, sadly, people will immediately go, no, this is not something I want to even watch or engage in or read, or, so you have to have some kind of minimum standard as well. So I would say try to aim for something also of quality. And that doesn't mean it can't be rough and raw, but it does mean, make sure the sound is good, and make sure the quality of the image is good enough, that kind of thing as well. But tell a good story from your heart is the main thing.
Thank you so much, Farah, for your time. It was an honor to hear from you and to speak to you, and thank you again.
Thank you.
Our next speaker and the final speaker of this evening's panel discussion is Nadine Burkan. Nadine, also known as Bint Quds, is a Palestinian-Danish artist and singer-songwriter. Her vibrant and evocative artwork offer a deep connection to her heritage, capturing the essence of Palestinian life. Over to you, Nadine.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you, Farah and Sliman Mansour, for the inspiring speeches. Well, I'm here today as a digital artist, and it's a different narrative because I feel it's a different world than Sliman Mansour, a different experience than Sliman Mansour has an artist, and a different experience than Farah. So I go by the name Bint Quds on Instagram, and some people ask me, why do you go by that name? The first reason was because I wanted to separate my art from my name, because I still go to Palestine and I still have to go visit my family, and I don't want to deal with any of the hassle and the issues that come up in the airport, as many people might have experienced. And the reason why I chose to go with the name Bint Quds was because I was actually inspired by a song called Ulad Quds by a Palestinian rapper. And in the song, he perfectly explains the lifestyle and the mindset of people who grew up in Jerusalem and the things we go through. And I really resonated with that, because most of my art, if anyone has seen my art, is about living in Jerusalem. But the funny thing is, and I think about it often, is that when I lived in Palestine, and I lived in Palestine almost my entire life, I was not making any art about Palestine. It was almost like, it's like the fish doesn't see the water. I was not interested in making art about Palestine. It felt like a cliche, because when you grow up there, you always hear about it all the time. When you're a kid, you don't care about the important stuff. It's only later in life, when you become an adult, you start to think, wow, I should have paid attention. I wish I could go back in time. I remember my grandmother and my grandfather would tell us stories of Al-Nakba and Al-Naksa. all the time. And me and my cousins would think, oh no, not again. It's like we found it boring. But now when I think about it, like, man, they were giving us their testimonies of things that they were going through. And last time I was in Palestine, I asked my grandmother to tell me the story again, and this time record it, because this felt important to me. However, it was only when I moved, I live in Denmark today, by the way, and it was only when I moved to Denmark 5 to 6 years ago was when I started making a lot of art about Palestine and Jerusalem. And I think it was because I felt extremely homesick. I missed everything about Palestine, and I felt like I didn't value my time living there. So I started drawing constantly, nonstop. I drew everything I missed in Jerusalem. I drew the fig trees, the vine trees, the separation wall, Jerusalem, Al-Aqsa Mosque, everything I could think of that reminded me of Palestine, I drew. And I remember there was a time I stumbled upon an fan art challenge for something called the Lo-Fi Girl. And I don't know if many people know what the Lo-Fi Girl is, but it's basically a live music stream which has an animation of a girl. It's very iconic. A lot of people know it. A girl who is studying on her desk. And a lot of people use that to study. And it's very famous. But I noticed in this art challenge that a lot of people started drawing this lo-fi girl in their nationality. So there was like a Chinese lo-fi girl, a Nigerian lo-fi girl, Lebanese lo-fi girl. Every single nationality you could think of, people drew. So when I saw that, I was like, I got inspired. I have to make a Palestinian lo-fi girl, because I want to see it exist. So I started drawing this lo-fi girl, and I think I spent maybe 15 hours nonstop working just on this drawing. I drew a huge window behind her with a beautiful view of Jerusalem. And I drew a lot of Palestinian books and so many details and stickers of Hamdallah and everything that could make a person Palestinian. I drew her with curly hair. And then I decided to post it on Reddit. And when I posted it on Reddit, it just exploded. I think, if I remember correctly, it got around 50,000 likes. And then people started telling me, you should send this Palestinian lo-fi girl to the official page on Instagram. And people started sending it themselves and tagging them. So I sent it once. They opened the message and ignored me. I sent it again. They ignored me. I sent it a third time. They ignored me, and I could see that they saw my message. So this time I thought to myself, okay, so they were sharing every single lo-fi girl. You could go on their page, you could see that there was a Lebanese lo-fi girl, Egyptian, Moroccan, but they just don't want to share the Palestinian lo-fi girl. And that's when it got to me. It's a form of censorship. This was the first time I ever experienced some form of censorship as an artist. And of course, it broke my heart. I felt hurt. I felt disappointed, because it just confirmed this constant exclusion we feel as a Palestinian people, as a collective. And I just experienced it firsthand, us being excluded from mainstream platforms. And but the more I thought of it, I kind of thought I must have done something right in this drawing to be censored, because they must have thought, if we post this picture, it must have some positive effect. And actually, since they censored, because of the censorship, I felt even more inspired to create the type of art that I do to represent Palestinians the way I do. And another experience I had since moving in Denmark that really motivated me to make more art was when I was in school. I started meeting a lot of my classmates from all over the world, and I met a young woman who hid the fact that she was Palestinian. She was ashamed of saying she was Palestinian. Every time someone asked her, "Where are you from?" she would say, "I'm Lebanese." And for me, as a Palestinian who lived in Palestine, I could not comprehend the idea that a Palestinian would be ashamed to say they are Palestinian. But when I think of it, I lived in Jerusalem. I went to a Palestinian school. I grew up in the culture. But she, after having conversations with her, she had to grow up in Denmark. And unfortunately, in many European countries, must be the same in the UK, there is a lot of racism. And not only if you're Palestinian, if you're non-white, you're going to experience racism. But specifically us as Palestinians, we're more prone to a certain kind of racism that denies our existence. And I remember that she was telling me, growing up in Denmark, she experienced that if she would say she was from Palestine in the school, the teacher would correct her. They would say Israel. And not being allowed to wear kufiya, or getting in trouble if you're wearing kufiya. And a lot of bullying from individuals who maybe have watched films that negatively affected the way they view Palestinians. So a lot of these experiences, they're not unique to her. That's what made me realize that Palestinians who live in the diaspora are subjected to this kind of racism that could affect their view of who they are. And that made me realize that art is so important, representation is so important. This same young woman, after a few months, she surprised me by having a sticker of one of my artworks on her laptop. And she started wearing kufiya because me and my classmates have created an engaging environment where we celebrate Palestinian culture, where we talk about things, where we exist unapologetically as Palestinians, and we are proud of who we are, and we bring up these subjects in school. So when I saw her have that sticker on her laptop, and I saw that pride that she regained as a Palestinian, that made me extremely proud. And I feel like it gave me a purpose to create more art that makes Palestinians proud. I also feel that the reason why art is important, why we as Palestinian artists, we have a very extremely important job, is because we create visuals as manifestations. And this is why I feel personally that I want to create art that makes Palestinians feel powerful. And because most of the time, most of the things we see about Palestine, it's negative, it's sad. People, the entire world sees us in our most vulnerable state. So in my art, I try to focus on celebrating our culture, celebrating us as a strong people, and seeing the things that I miss about Palestine, seeing the most beautiful aspects about us as Palestinians. And when I think of how I use my art as a form of resistance, the way I see people react to my art when they wear hoodies with my art on it and they walk around proudly showing that they're Palestinians, I think to myself, I want my art to be as accessible as possible and as affordable as possible. And I want to use it to help. It's not just for fun. I have to do art for Palestine, for Palestinians, to help the cause.
Thank you so much, Nadine. We have just a few questions for you. So the first one was kind of touching on what you had spoken about briefly, and I guess that is the same with, well, this feeling is very common amongst a lot of Palestinian artists, whatever their art medium may be, and that is the sense of duty that you feel through your art to Palestine, and I just wanted to delve in a bit deeper there as well. Like, how old were you when you started doing your artwork, and when did it feel like a duty to convey the Palestinian struggle through your artwork?
Well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I was around 5 to 6 years old when I started making art, and I was inspired by my father. I grew up in a very artistic home. I grew up watching my father paint the city of Jerusalem by using coffee and mud and all kinds of ingredients. And that just created, I just fell in love with art by watching him make art. I think most artists would agree when you make something, just like Farah Nabilsi said, when you make a piece of art and it's good, it's because you made it from the heart. Like most of my artwork or the things that I make that are very successful and people have reacted well to were things that I made because I felt some kind of scream. I felt something inside me that needed to be expressed. It's kind of like a dream that needed to be manifested. It's an artwork that I dreamt of or needed to create so it can exist in the world. And then people react to it the way they do. I think it's because we also resonate. Most Palestinians resonate with each other. We have some kind of collective subconscious. And when people see, for example, I was very inspired by Suleiman Mansour growing up. He was one of my heroes as an artist. I grew up seeing his very famous painting, Jamal Mahamel, I think, is the old man carrying the city of Jerusalem. And that is the kind of picture that is, I think, is something that exists in our subconscious as a collective, as a Palestinian, that lives inside of us. So I guess I would say that my answer, no one starts by it's only when I see the reaction of the people that you realize that this is a duty, because that's not what every artist thinks of when they start making something. It's because usually there's a voice inside of them saying that this needs to exist. But of course, after the war in Gaza, everything shifted in my mind. I feel like I cannot make art about anything else. I have to use whatever energy I have for good. I have to use all my energy to help the people of Gaza.
I also just wanted to ask again. Sorry about my canaries; they're very vocal right now. Um, just another question I wanted to ask as well. Something you had briefly mentioned, which I've always thought of myself, but you worded it perfectly. Was using your artwork to, as manifestations, which I thought was very powerful. And a lot of your artwork has been displayed and printed around many parts of the world. I was talking to you briefly before we started the call on seeing your artwork up in Belfast, in the north of Ireland, and I just wanted to ask, what do you hope to manifest specifically through your artwork, and for others to manifest as well by seeing it and relating to it?
But I would say the number thing I would love to manifest is seeing Palestine free. So, and also seeing us Palestinians as strong, because we're always seen as weak, and as Palestinians we were always spoken for. We haven't really had the chance since the Nakba to represent ourselves, to represent the most beautiful parts of our culture, of us. So I feel it's very, very important the way we present ourselves, the way we see ourselves. You hear life coaches talking about this all the time, like, be careful the way you talk to yourself. You have to use positive affirmations for yourself, but we should do that to ourselves as a people, because we have been oppressed for so long and represented or spoken for by others and represented negatively for so long, that we should take ownership of our narrative. We should represent ourselves, and we should do it proudly, and we should see ourselves as a strong people. And when we start seeing ourselves in this way, then I believe that we can succeed, we can be free.
100%. I agree with you, and thank you so much, Nadine, for your time and your contribution. That is unfortunately all we have time for today. I just want to thank again all three of our speakers. Thank you to Suleiman Mansour, Farah Nabulsi, and Nadine Burkan. Thank you everyone for tuning in online on PRC's Facebook and YouTube page. Please do stay online. There will be some different events advertised in the next few coming weeks, and just stay tuned for those. Thank you all for tuning in.